Hi everyone, my name is Holly Coleman, your instructor for this topic, which is a very tough one. I've really been putting off doing this video because it is very, very sensitive. I just want to put a little warning out there that I'm going to show you some images throughout the video that might be a little intense, but it's to get those feelings going, to raise awareness of what is happening, out there. People can wonder, like, how could you ever abuse or neglect another person that you're taking care of? Because that's what we're going to talk about in this video, is the abuse, neglect, and exploitation of an individual with disabilities. That abuse can happen at a group home. It can happen in an institution. It can happen at a hospital. It can also happen in a person's own home. So, the definition of abuse varies to different people, because everyone has experienced abuse at one point or another in their lives. They may not be aware. You may not be aware that you've actually been in that situation. For example, bullying, physical attacks, intimidation, neglect, emotional manipulation, verbal abuse, ganging up, triangulation, character assassination. These are all common and typical forms of abuse. And people experience abuse in their relationships with their parents, their siblings, other family members, teachers, peers, classmates, co-workers, friends, acquaintances, romantic partners, neighbors, and especially your caretakers. So someone that is meant to take care of you and meant to provide a safe environment for you, especially in an independent living situation, may not be helping you with the best intentions. So some people might be listening to this and they wonder, well, if it was so bad, then why didn't that person say something? Or if that happened, why didn't that client step up? And why did they stay silent for so long? So just like with domestic violence to a normal functioning person, some people may try to hide that abusive experience from other people because they're embarrassed, they're scared, they don't know. I've stated in my other videos that, when you're working with individuals with disabilities, 99% of this population wants that safety, that security, that love, that positive attention. They don't understand why certain people are the way they are. They don't understand why someone that's meant to take care of you is really, so mean or cruel. They don't process that. They are just seeking that fulfillment right now. I've had clients that have come from horrible home lives. I'll look in their case history. I'll start doing some investigating on someone that might be, having some behavior issues now. I kind of start backtracking, especially if it's a new client that I'm working with. And I start digging in their historical file, and you see that they came from, a very abusive situation. And one of the examples that I had is I actually had a girl that, when I say girl, she was in her 20s, but I worked with a girl that would just talk about, why doesn't my mom love me? Why doesn't my mom talk to me? Why doesn't my mom want anything to do with me? And it would break my heart, because she just did, all she wanted was her mother's love. But if you look at her history, her mother had plenty of opportunity to get her act together. You're talking, this poor girl was removed from the home for severe neglect. Her mother wasn't feeding her. Her mother wasn't taking care of her at all. Her mother was letting someone sexually abuse her. Her mother was physically abusing her. And to this particular person, because she is, mentally disabled, developmentally disabled, she just couldn't process that. She couldn't process the severe trauma that she had been through in her life, and to know that that was just wrong and that your mother is actually a horrible person. But that's something that I can't tell her. So I have to do, it's, social workers, and social workers really learn this trick, and it's called therapeutic lying, especially when you're working with people with dementia. Therapeutic lying is when someone goes, my husband's coming to get me. And you're looking at them like, okay. And you know that their husband died like 5 years ago. They don't understand. So if you tell them, no, he's not, he's dead, when they can't even process that, they don't understand that. They just keep remembering, my husband, and now they're in that mental state where that's all they focus on. For you to sit there and crush that bubble would just be devastating. So with therapeutic lying, I I'm gonna have to look and see if that's a real term, because that's just something that we used in school. We call it therapeutic lying, where you tell someone a lie for their best interest. I know that sounds so bad, but you don't tell the dementia patient that her husband really is dead and that he's never coming to get her. You don't do that. You say, of course, okay, well, until he comes and gets you, why don't we go ahead and do this? So you're not really saying yes or no. You're just kind of like trying to distract them. Well, it's the same thing with, someone that's telling me about their mother, and I literally want to just like find this woman, write her a letter, tell her what a horrible person she is, send hate mail to her. That's the protective parent in me, and the protective case manager, because I really get very attached to the people that I care for. And when this poor girl is telling me, why doesn't my mom love me? Why doesn't my mom talk to me? Why doesn't my mom... And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of all the horrible things this woman has put this poor girl through. I don't have the heart to tell her, your mom is an absolute piece of garbage. What I respond with is, well, you have so many people around you that loves you, which is the truth, and your mom just might be trying to find herself right now. So that would be that therapeutic lie to kind of, just steer her from obsessing so much on that abandonment. So, in our society, so much of what should be openly considered abuse is normalized. Narcissistic behavior is normalized as competition or high self-esteem. Physical abuse of children is discipline. Neglect could be considered character building. Intimidation is just being assertive. Triangulation is seeking support. Character assassination, is telling the truth. I'm calling you out. Bullying is, I'm just joking. Gaslighting is, it's just my side of the story. And alternative facts, truth, and so on. So, we live in a time where we're very comfortable with accepting people's excuses. They have this shitty behavior, and then we are like, oh, okay, well, they're not a total waste of space. So when people say that they've been abused and their experiences may not be recognized as traumatic, or the abuse is like considered normal, it can make them feel more invalidated and traumatized. And it's very challenging with disabled population, because if they're mentally disabled, they really just can't even absorb what has fully happened to them. They just can't. They really cannot completely. They can't accept. They can't move on. They can't heal. You are leaving a shell of a person. Okay, I have worked with so many abuse cases as adults. Okay, a lot of social workers and people that get into the health field, they might be exposed a lot to children and teens and young adult. A lot of my population that I work with is over 30 years old. So, I have another example I have is a patient that I worked with for many, many years. And he's an autistic individual that is in his 40s. And to him, the sexual abuse that he suffered when he was in an institutional setting, they used to call them developmental centers. And basically what it was is institution setting. And he suffered greatly to sexual abuse that was by the staff. And he can never move on from that. Everything, can be a trigger to him. Seeing a black man, seeing a certain van, seeing a certain color, seeing a certain situation. And so because of his autism, he's really stuck in this roundabout, pattern where he's just constantly scared, afraid, and so every day, staff working with him every day has to reassure him that he's going to be okay, that he is safe. And what that also triggered with him is major gender identity disorder, because he didn't understand why another man was hurting him. He couldn't process that. He grew up with the idea of man and woman. So to an autistic person whose mental functioning is on a mild to moderate level of mental retardation, he can't understand why. It was just very wrong to him, and so now he's questioning his own identity. If I have long hair, am I considered a girl? If I have short hair, am I considered a boy? If I carry a backpack, am I a boy? If I carry a purse, am I a girl? And so he's going back and forth, and he will do this for the rest of his life. And there will be no healing for him, which is so sad and unfortunate, because what happens is that he will lash out, he will have major behaviors, and unfortunately, what do we do with behaviors when you're dealing with a disabled individual? You are dealing with support team members that think, oh, well, his medications are off, or oh, he needs this or that. I mean, it's just it creates a domino effect. So, minimization is really related to it's closely related to normalization. And I have found a really awesome article. It's called 5 Reasons Why People Stay Silent. And it touches upon a lot of what I've already started to say, but it's on the Psychology Self blog.psychcentral.com. Psychology Self by an author named Darius Sikana-Vikius. Very crazy. I'm guessing he's Greek. It's very. I'll go ahead and what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description of this video for this specific article, because I really think that it's amazing how well, it was crazy because I already had written this lecture. And then when I found this article, it was almost like this guy had channeled. I was like, wow, this is almost exactly what I had just put together. So I just, this is a great article about abuse in general. So in his article, he talks about normalization, minimization, shame, fear, isolation, betrayal, and lack of support as being those primary motivating factors for people to stay silent when they are abused. So, a lot of victims, abuse victims, they don't talk about being abused because they don't have anybody to talk to. They're either lonely or isolated, or they're extremely dependent on their abusers. And that's what you can think about when you're working with disabled individuals, because a lot of abuse happens at the hands of their caretakers, whether it's a parent, a foster parent, a house lead in a group home, a direct care staff in your house. So, this regular person that's taking care of you is hitting you, slapping you, yelling at you, exploiting you. I caught one staff years ago buying personal items on a client's credit card. The credit card was meant for housing items and groceries because the person only got $30 in food stamps. And I just so happened to check the statement when I got the case. This worker had been working with them for over a year, and I wound up getting the case, and I was looking at stuff, and things just weren't adding up with this person's finances. And when I started looking at the bank statement, which I got a copy of, which the worker, of course, was dodging around, I noticed purchases, online purchases for things that I know damn well that my client wouldn't be able to order on his own because he couldn't even read. So right there is a big red flag. And that's considered exploitation. That is financial exploitation of an individual with a disability. That is against the law. So there's definitely, when you're thinking of working in this field, working in the healthcare field, the different types of abuse is you've got your physical abuse, you've got your mental abuse, you have physical, mental, you also have exploitation, which could be financial exploitation. So pretty much, this actually connects to this video too when we talk about confidentiality and HIPAA and things like that. Say you are videoing a client and you think it's funny. You're like, oh, look at this person's doing. It's so funny. And you post it on your social media page, and then the social media page gets tons of hits and tons of likes, and who knows, you might even get paid for that particular video, because sometimes, you get paid when you start bringing in awesome money on social media, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. So you go ahead and film a client, your video takes off, you make money off the video. That is considered financial exploitation. I don't care if you got permission from the parent of the client. I don't care if you got permission from the client themselves. If that client is not a competent major and is coherent enough to understand what Facebook is or Instagram is or whatever, you are exploiting them. You're crossing. I mean, it links back to your ethics and boundaries. It is pretty much telling you, you wouldn't have gotten all those hits if it wasn't for that person. Now you've got all these hits on your video, and it's because of that person. You're exploiting them. You're exploiting their disability. That's what you're doing. So one of the things is, the most important thing is that we are all considered mandated reporters. Now, there is a certification that you can get to be an official mandated reporter, because some states require that. But when you work in the healthcare field, when you work as a teacher, as a nurse, as a police officer, as anything that is dealing with people. If you sense abuse, neglect, or exploitation and you don't say anything, that is considered failure to report, and you can get a huge fine, up to I think $250,000, and actually jail time, especially if that person was severely abused and being neglected and you knew about it, and they proved that you knew about it. All right, so anyone can be affected by domestic violence and abuse, but people with disabilities are more likely to experience abuse than people without disabilities. And you want to know why? It's because the abuse is about power and control, and people with disabilities may face unique challenges and barriers to accessing support. Domestic violence can cause temporary or permanent disability. People with disabilities experience higher rates of domestic violence, sexual assault, and abuse. Violence, assault, and abuse against a person with a disability often take on non-traditional forms. And people with disabilities face additional barriers when seeking help. So, the red flags of abuse are the same for everyone, but a person with disabilities may experience non-traditional signs, including an abusive partner who, tells them that they are not allowed to have a pain flare up, or steals or withholds their Social Security disability check, tells them that they are a bad parent or could never be a parent because they have a disability. Use gaslighting to invalidate their disability. For example, you're faking it, it's all in your head. Uses their disability to shame or humiliate them, like, yeah, go ahead, walk, cripple. Refuses to help them use the bathroom or complete necessary life tasks when they had previously agreed to. Withholds or threatens or to withhold medication, purposely over medicates them, mixes medications in a dangerous, non-prescribed way, which is considered going against doctor's orders. When you are tampering with someone's prescriptions, that is against the law. So they instigate sexual activity when they know their partner is not capable of consenting. Withholds, damages, or breaks assistive devices, like, oh, you're not going to be going anywhere without your wheelchair. Does not allow them to see a doctor. That's usually because that doctor would be able to tell that they're being abused by marks on them, bruises, cuts. Also they could, seem very skittish. A doctor hopefully will pick up on certain things like that. Threatens to out their disability to others. For example, someone who is HIV positive may not wish to disclose their status, and their abusive partner will use that status to control them. Threatens to harm their service animal. Uses a disability as an excuse for the abuser. Tells them that they deserve abuse because of their disability. No one's gonna want you because look at you. And to tell someone that is already so vulnerable something like that, it literally makes me sick. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was adopted, and it's called the ADA. That was adopted in 1990. It provides protection from discrimination for people with disabilities. The ADA defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities. It's important to note that under Title II of ADA, social services such as domestic violence shelters must be accessible for people with disabilities. Title III of the ADA covers public accommodations, which generally includes all places open to the public, such as offices for counseling services, legal services, translation services, doctor's offices, and shelters. So, per the ADA, to be accessible to people with disabilities, shelters and offices are required to admit people with disabilities into their shelter. People with disabilities must have an equal opportunity to benefit from programs, services, and activities. They must be treated equally, may not be excluded from shelters on the basis of having a disability. So, for example, it's not permissible to deny admittance to an individual because he or she has a mental health disability or HIV. They also have to provide reasonable accommodations. So, reasonable accommodations, it's alterations to policies, practices, and procedures. You allow a program or shelter to provide the same service to people with disabilities as people without disabilities. Reasonable accommodations must be made unless they entail significant difficulty or expense. For example, if a shelter has a no pet policy, that policy may need to be altered to admit an individual who has a service dog. I know that when I worked in a psychiatric hospital, I had a patient that had a service dog. We could not allow that dog on the floor. It is a hospital. And I'm telling you, this patient raised hell. It was her emotional support animal. It was not an animal that physically assisted her for like sight or anything like that. But you have to think about the other patients that have a fear of dogs. And where are you going to walk a dog? Where? You are in a hospital. There is no, and it's a psychiatric hospital, so you're on lockdown. There is no way that you'd be able to have your animal. But what we did do is we would escort her with security to a private location off the floor, meaning in a separate part of the hospital, off the unit, into a private room, and her husband would bring the dog, and we would allow them to interact with each other and for her to spend time with her dog every evening after dinner for like 2 hours. So that was the accommodation that we made specifically for her. So that way the dog still gives her that emotional support. The dog is still familiar with her, with its owner, because I'm sure it causes the dog anxiety not being around their owner that they have tended to for so long. So we tried to really be accommodating as best, and everyone was happy. She understood. I had to tell her, look, I cannot have and her dog was big. It wasn't like a little tiny thing. It was a big dog. So I had to tell her that I can't have your dog. You don't have a private room. You share a room, and the person that is in your room is allergic to pet hair, cats and dogs, because it was on their allergy sheet. So, there's a lot of things you got to think about. So, let's see what we have next. What's important is how to report abuse. No one should have to feel afraid, abused, or have to put up with threats of abuse. Mentally disabled people are often the target of abuse, and they might not always know how to report it. So you might have to report the abuse that you see or suspect, depending on the mentally disabled person's level of communication. Don't hesitate to report abuse if the person recognizes that she is being abused, because sometimes the person who is abused is too afraid to report the crime. Okay? Very important. So, please keep this in mind. Step 1, record any abuse that you may see by taking pictures of injuries, attempting to record verbal abuse, writing down the dates and time that you have seen or suspect the abuse occurred, asking that disabled person if the abuse took place, turn the records over to the authorities. Okay? Step 2, contact the police immediately via 911 or the local emergency phone number if you are the eyewitness to a disabled person being abused. Notify the police if you seen an abused disabled adult get verbally yelled at, emotionally abused, or physically harmed. 3, report suspicion of abuse to the disabled person's doctor, social worker, or manager of the group home or other living facility where the disabled person resides. Offer any proof of evidence that you have collected to show why you suspect abuse. Report the abuse to family members if you suspect that the abuse is taking place in a facility or public venue. Number 4, call, write, or visit the state's Department of Health and Human Services or call the state hotline to report abuse. Elder abuse can be reported to the Department of Elderly Services. Child abuse can be reported to the Department of Children's Services. And all other abuse can be reported to the Department of Public Health or emergency hotlines provided by this purpose by your state. Now, I'm in Louisiana, so for all you people that are in Louisiana, and just keep in mind that different companies you work for, they have a protocol. So, for example, in the hospital setting, I wouldn't immediately call 911. What I would do is I would immediately go to the director of nursing, that she is the boss on that floor. So I would go to the director of nursing. Then I would go ahead and together file a report. Now if it was abuse in the hospital, which is something I never saw, maybe some verbal altercations that were inappropriate, but I've never witnessed physical abuse in the hospital that I worked at, thank God. But if it had been physical abuse and it was an employee, that's something, for example, I'm definitely going to go to the DON with, not to mention security, because it's probably on camera and we want to see. Now, working, you have in Louisiana, and I'm sure it's a little bit different in different states, but let's see. I was trying to just look real quick. I know for myself, what I was trained to do was to call protective services immediately. Immediately. Do not hesitate. If you are even suspecting anything doesn't seem right, cover your ass. Okay? CYA. Cover your ass. Because, like I've said, I will say it over and over and over. You'll hear me say this in a lot of videos. Failure to report is considered just as bad. I'm telling you, it is. By not doing nothing, it's better to do something than nothing. It's better to go to your supervisor and say something instead of nothing. So in my situation, I would call Adult Protective Services because I work with people over 18. I only have a few clients right now that are over 65. If those people over 65 had something happen to them, I would call Elderly Protective Services. So, in Louisiana, we go by Child Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, and Elderly Protective Services. So, off the Legal Beagle that I just read, the step 4 was call, write, or visit the Department of Health and Human Services. Pretty much it's known as DHH or DHHS. You can do that. You can call the hotline. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what they're telling you, but I'm just saying, like in my situation, I've always contacted protective services first, unless it's like immediate, like violent kind of stuff. Of course, the police or ambulance, whatever is necessary. Then you're calling protective services. You still are going to call protective services because you want to make sure that you are documenting and filing a report. So especially with your case manager, these are things you have to remember to do. And it will also trigger, an audit. If your agency is known not to, document things properly, an incident is going to be attached to a critical incident report and form, which is what we will talk about in your case management for dummies class, which I'm working on that one. So, most important, that's what you're not gonna sit on it. You are not gonna sit on it. Let's see. This is one thing. Let's see. and pull this up. Um, as I mentioned before, people, that are development disabled, they're way more likely to be abused. In fact, 4 to 10 times more likely to be abused than someone without a disability. So, you know, they're compared to like general population, people with developmental disabilities are at greater risk. So, it's just so sad. Um, they're more likely to be. I just want y'all to think about this as I'm starting to wrap up this video. Tend to be more abused more frequently, are abused for longer periods of time, are less likely to access the justice system, are more likely to be abused by a caregiver or someone they know. Many are repeatedly abused by the same person. And they're more likely to remain in that situation. It's so sad. Children with disabilities in particular, they have a higher risk of being abused or neglected. There was, was jotting down notes when I was writing this, but the United States Department of Health and Human Services, 11% of all child abuse victims in 2009 had a physical, cognitive, and or behavioral disability, and children with disabilities are almost 2 times more likely to be physically or sexually abused or neglected than children without disabilities. So in addition, that abuse is typically more severe, is more likely to occur multiple times, and is more likely to be repeated for a longer period of time. I mentioned before, because some people are probably still asking why. A predator is a predator. That's pretty much what I call an abuser, is a predator. They're a predator. They're gonna look at a person with a disability as weak, vulnerable, especially if they're nonverbal. They can't report the abuse, and it makes them an easy target. As I mentioned, my client that was, sexually abused. People with those disabilities, they're isolated. They're dependent on a small circle of friends or caregivers for that support, including just insistence with the basic physical needs. So when those caregivers are abused, when the caregivers are abusers, that poses a very difficult decision for the victim, who is required to choose between the potential of continuing the abuse or an uncertain future. And I know that sounds crazy, because it's crazy to me. But then I think about it and it's like, wow, if you are in a wheelchair and you are so dependent on everyone else for everything, and all you have is your mom, and your mom beats the crap out of you on a regular basis, but she pays the bills and makes sure you have food, and, yeah, she beats me. So you're going to find, someone probably like actually weighing the pros and cons. Well, I could live here with her and get hit every once in a while, or I could, go into a group home, and what happens if I get beat there? I mean, they start seeing like they just have no way out. They're in this helpless situation. So, and you also think that a lot of these people can live in a very segregated environment. I think group homes are very segregated, because it's not like they're just open where anybody can just come and go. And especially the group homes that I've worked in, some of them were in a gated campus. The people, the individuals there could leave the group home and walk around the campus, but they would never walk out of those gates. And and what's interesting is I actually watched someone walk to a gate that was left open and stand there. And I'm like, man, if that was me, I would bolt. I would just go just to see, what's out there. But that person had been in that group home for so long, behind those gates for so long. They had never went through those gates without a person being with them. So to stand there at the gate and see that gate wide open, they didn't look at it as opportunity. They looked at it as just pure fear. Like, oh my God, what if I do this? What will happen? If I go through this, what will happen? So, that abuse can occur more. It could be hidden, maybe more easily, because what if coworkers are covering for each other? Victims who are abused in group settings, they can have limited access to police, advocates, medical or social services representatives, or others who can intervene and help. They're limited. The people that are nonverbal or limited communication abilities or cognitive disabilities, they may find it difficult to report the abuse because they just don't know how. So, they're afraid that they will not be believed as well. They tell someone, what if they're called a liar? Then they're labeled as a liar. And to them, that could be the most awful thing in the whole world. So, people that have been verbally abused, it gives them low self-esteem, and in some cases, a belief that I deserve that. Just like the girl I was telling you about, why doesn't my mom love me? Why am I not good enough? Why didn't she want me anymore? She honestly had been through so much trauma growing up in her childhood that she felt she deserved what her mother did to her. She made excuses for her. And we can't understand that. We're like blown away. We're like, what? But you have to understand the mental capacity of her being able to process this is just not there. So, and sometimes it's easier to abuse or exploit someone if you inherently believe that people with disabilities are less human, less valuable, and don't contribute to society. And there are people out there like that. There are disgusting people out there like that do not feel that a person that is disabled is even worth the air that they breathe. I have seen and heard the most disgusting comments, the most disgusting videos, the most disgusting TikTok crap. If some of y'all aren't familiar with that app, TikTok, Instagram, all that social media stuff, when the coronavirus started locking down cities in March, just the amount of ignorance that started surfacing was insane. And there was someone that posted a video that was actually talking about survival of the fittest, that this is what's going to thin the herd. And I'm thinking, what? Everybody I take care of needs people. They're not the fittest. They're surviving because we are helping them survive. So because there's a pandemic, I'm supposed to just turn my head on these people that need us? And I think about that. What if that's your mother? What if that's your sister? What if that's your brother? Your own child. Would you want someone to sit there and say, oh, well, good luck to your child. Good luck to you. Survival of the fittest. Hope the virus doesn't get them. That's blown. They are human, just like you are human. We are all human. It doesn't matter what challenges a person has, whether they're in a wheelchair, using crutches, using braces on their legs to walk, a cane because they're blind, a hearing aid because they're hearing impaired. It just blows my mind that you could have any type of disability, or mental illness. Let's even talk about that. Mentally ill, you could be physically 100%, but mentally you are a broken shell. So what you're telling me is that person doesn't deserve to live, that because you have quote unquote nothing wrong with you, which I seriously doubt if you are looking at another person as less human, you don't think that they contribute anything to society, which couldn't be further from the truth. So, just blows my mind That word abuse is a broad term that describes any behavior that is unwanted, intentionally harms an individual, is demeaning or insulting, causes another person to be afraid. People with disabilities experience the same forms of physical violence, sexual abuse, and molestation and neglect as the general population. However, they experience these abuses at much higher rates. For example, people with disabilities are victims of nearly 1 million non-fatal violent crimes every year, including rape, sexual assault, aggravated and simple physical assault, and robbery. People with disabilities are also more likely to experience several less common forms of abuse, meaning it's not uncommon for an abuser to manipulate medications or to withhold access to assistive equipment and technology, including communication devices, which is insane to me. And when I say communication device, if for those that are not familiar with, and that's okay because you're learning. This is why this video is in existence, is because you're learning. But for my nonverbal population that I've worked with in the past that qualified for communication devices, what that device does is it's their way to speak. If they are able to point to a picture and tell you, for example, I had a guy that, he was very particular on, he was nonverbal, but he was very particular on certain things that he wanted. And so his device was programmed to tell you where he wanted to eat, what he wanted to eat, where he wanted to go for the day, and who he wanted to see. And we put pictures and stuff in it, and all he had to do was touch the picture. So for him, that's how his device was programmed. I had another individual that was 100% there in her mind, 100% there in her mind, but was just stuck in this horrible shell of a body. Now, she could move her hand, and so she was able to type everything that she was able to see and hear and ask for with no problems. So that would be like me taking the device away from those two people and going, you know what, I don't even want to deal with you right now. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't care what you have to say. Give me that damn device. Sit over there and be quiet. You're not getting it back. And you're using that as a tool to control their behavior. That's what you're doing. You're using their technology like, oh, you want to go somewhere? Haha, guess what? Yeah, you don't have your wheelchair now. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? Okay, that is horrible. Okay, and I'm telling you this because it's happened. All right, I've seen it. So in cases, personal care assistants might refuse, and I call, you can call them personal care assistants, direct service workers, patient care staff, direct care staff, whatever, family member, whoever. But the person that is taking care of them might refuse to provide just that essential assistance. And, in many of these cases, that person that's suffering, they are suffering at the hands of someone they know. They know their attacker. A majority of these abusers are family members, they're relatives, they're caregivers, they're neighbors. I'm reminding you guys this because I want you to drill. I want it drilled in your head. It could be an educator. It could be a staff member assigned to support that person. It could be anybody. So do not think that it's just this black and white issue, okay? Because it's not. When I was researching for this class, just in 2016, because I was looking for like statistics on where we are on certain things, and just in Colorado, okay, in 2016 there was 850 cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation involving seniors or individuals with developmental disabilities. Okay, that's just in Colorado. That's in Denver. Actually, Denver, I'm sorry. So that's just in one city. So just take that, multiply it by 50 states and all those cities within those states, and you're going to probably come up with a number that actually makes you sick. Um, you know, the language used to describe people with developmental disabilities has changed over time. So I just want to just put a little disclaimer out there. Many terms and language that are now considered disrespectful and offensive were once considered acceptable. And we talked about that in video 1. I think we covered it a little bit in video 2. We're going to cover it again and when we talk about people first language. So, as people with developmental disabilities have begun to advocate for the use of people first language and more respectful words to describe people with disabilities in spoken and written language, terms as retarded, handicapped, trainable, I think it's oh gosh, what's the, I'm blanking, I'm sorry, retarded, handicapped, trainable. Those would be the 3 that just stick on top of my head. They've been replaced in many law documents and things like that. The remnants of what is now considered unacceptable language and terms may still be found in references. So when you're doing your own research, don't be like, oh my God. You have to understand that we're changing our language, we're changing our culture, we're evolving, and sometimes it really takes a long time for that to happen, and it sucks. It does. It sucks. It absolutely sucks. But an example is like the ARC. I don't know if people know what that stands for. The ARC, it's the Association of Retarded Citizens. You also have different government bodies called like the President's Panel of Mental Retardation. Organizations that were founded during earlier years, federal laws. Another example is community residences for mentally retarded persons, case law and quotations. These terms are used from time to time. So, it's not, I just want to stress that it's not because people are like, oh my God, the person that wrote this is just super insensitive, or Holly, when you talk about certain disorders or disabilities or any challenges, sometimes you use the wrong verbiage. Well, it's a challenge for me because I've been in this profession, working in the medical field since I was 16 years old. I'll be 46 at the end of the year, which I'm very proud of that because I look amazing. So, I apologize because a lot of stuff has changed for me as well. Let's see. We're going to talk about elder abuse in another video, because I don't want this video to be extremely long, but I do want to say that with examples that we talked about the examples of abuse, and I just want to stress, a mandated reporter that fails to file a report is generally subjected to punishment such as misdemeanor criminal prosecution and fines. If harm comes to that individual through the result of a professional's failure to report abuse, or even stiffer penalties may exist. Okay, so reporting suspected abuse brings with it some weighty issues. Okay, psychologists, social workers, counselors, they all have ethical guidelines that highlight mandated reporting as a key standard of confidentiality. All right, although the need to maintain client confidentiality is an important standard, no client can be given the guarantee of complete confidentiality. Although child abuse, abuse on a disabled individual, elderly abuse, it can be defined in more detail. We'll talk about it more. I'm doing child abuse, a whole separate video, because it's just so much content when it comes to children. And it's a lot to absorb. It really is a lot to absorb. So the role of a social worker as a mandated reporter, it encompasses many different professional roles, and that the primary mission of social work is to enhance human well-being and help meet the needs of all people who are vulnerable or oppressed. In this role, social workers assist families where there are serious domestic consequences, which may involve child maltreatment, maltreatment of a disabled individual, whether they're a child, teenager, young adult, stating that when making a report of suspected abuse, using their professional judgment, social workers must act by limiting the client's right to self-determination when client actions or potential actions pose a serious, foreseeable, or imminent risk to themselves or others. So, there's definitely some discussion as to whether mandated reporting laws hinder confidentiality, and for that reason, some professionals are reluctant to report suspicions of child abuse. Some people think that when they're faced with that issue of disclosing suspected abuse, that one must fully, be aware of those legal requirements, but then also consider what the client wants from the therapist. So most likely that client wants the process, wants to process the long concealed distress and address myriad emotions, including anger, shame, sadness, guilt, and the host of other issues commonly experienced by victims of sexual abuse. The client wants and needs to do this in a supportive, safe, and reassuring context in order to regain a sense of control and, over the frightening events of the past that potentially could radiate into their present. So even though professionals are mandated to report abuse, the clinical aspects also need careful consideration. So like I said before, there'll be a separate video for talking about child abuse and elderly abuse, because there's definitely some different things that I want to talk about, especially with elderly, because dementia definitely plays a huge part. Like, that's to me the scariest thing. With a demented person that's abused, half the time they don't even realize that it's happening to them. So anyway, I just want to tell you guys that working with this population is so rewarding, and working with individuals that appreciate you so much and love you so much unconditionally. It's an unconditional love. It truly is, and it can be very frustrating. It really can. There's been several points in my career where I have worked with extremely violent patients, and I can, in the back of my mind, see where, anybody else would have been dealing with that situation. That person could have probably been like physically abused, but it's like, luckily I kind of, I've been doing this for so long, and I know that, it's extremely wrong, and also will ruin your career if you were ever to abuse someone and get arrested for it. You might as well just hang that up for the rest of your life, nor should you be around anybody else for that matter. But there's been several situations in my career where I'm like, whoa, if this had happened to anybody else, I can really see a person in the community like beating the crap out of them, and I'm gonna say this. I had a client that very high functioning. When I say high functioning, mild MR, mild DD. And when I say MR, that is I know that retardation is a frowned upon word, but people are still diagnosed with that on that scale. So, when I say MR, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm actually reading off what is a scale. There's mild, moderate, severe, profound. That's their functioning level. But I had a client that was mild to moderate. I would say mild, but more with bipolar, borderline personality kind of mixture here. Was severely abused as a child. Was locked in cages, fed like a dog, and he remembered. He remembered, and he would talk about it and tell you about it and tell you exactly what happened to him. And he lived in a fantasy world. To him, the fantasy world was more comforting than the real world. If he made up his own world and pretended like he was a superhero, that gave him that confidence and protection. But that also gave him a very active imagination. And he lied about being sexually abused by several people. And, you know, an average person that doesn't know this person, they get accused of of sexually assaulting someone. They could get angry. They could retaliate. They could, So that's why it's so important for some of these individuals to have people like me to advocate for them, to explain, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. There is absolutely no way that this person was sexually abused at this location, because we have cameras, because there was more than one staff there, because you interview the other people that were there in the home. It's all like, it's so black and white. It's so obvious that the client was lying, and he made everybody go through the hoopla. I followed. I always take any accusation serious. I don't care if I'm thinking in the back of my head, God, this is such bullshit. I still have to take it serious, because, like I've said before, if I was to do nothing and it turned out to be true, then I could get in serious, serious trouble. So I had to go through the motions as if he really was sexually abused, and take it to the hospital, tell the hospital that what he just told me. They, called the police, and I mean, we were dealing with this for hours. He was interviewed by the police. His story changed a little bit, but as soon as he found out that they were going to do an abuse kit on him, and they were going to have to do some further investigating, and I guess it started to become more real to him. His lies was just spiraling, and I remember sitting in, I mean, this is after like hours. I had worked all day. Now I'm at, the hospital with this guy and his staff is looks just exhausted as well, because this particular person could just really drive you. And, I will never forget. I will never forget him looking at me going, "You're going to be mad at me." And I was like, "Really? Why do you say that? Why do you think I'm going to be mad at you?" And he was like, "Because I lied." And it turned out that he lied because he felt that attention, him being at the hospital, everybody fussing over him, everybody all around him, everybody there supporting him, whatever, would bring his mom to him, would bring his mom or sister or anybody for that matter from his biological family, who are all pieces of garbage and abusive as well. But in his mind, he made up this whole elaborate story because he wanted to see his birth mother for his birthday. So y'all are probably like, "What? Wow." It happens. It happens. So that's why I always tell people a little bit of advice when you're doing the CYA, cover your ass. A little bit of advice is, if you're ever bathing a person that you feel is their behavior's a little off, they might be a little overly affectionate, there's maybe been accusations before of staff touching them or whatever, and maybe this it's been proven false every time. Regardless, that's an issue. You're not bathing that person alone. You're going to go ahead and let your supervisor know, can you send backup? can you send a facilitator over here, a case manager or somebody, because I don't, this person is saying this and this and this about me. Same thing, with, some people don't like cameras in the home. I personally love cameras in the home because I know I don't do anything wrong. I live my life as if I'm on camera because I've worked so long in the medical field. But it's a very good feeling to know that those cameras are there to save your ass. They help cover your ass. So you got a client that talks a whole bunch of stuff about you, you can be like, watch that camera. I didn't do a dang thing to that guy. You can look right there. I was not even near him the whole time. And I'm telling you, those are all real experiences. Um, did I? One person asked me the last time I taught this class, and I used that example about my guy that lied about being sexually abused. They were like, "What did? How did you act? Like, what did you do? What was your reaction?" And you know what my reaction was? No reaction. My reaction was no reaction. That's what he wanted. He wanted a reaction. He thrived on negative attention. Really, any attention, but he thrived on that type of attention. And so, what I did was I just looked down and I said, "Okay, all right. Well, we need to go ahead and let these doctors finish doing what they're doing, because what if it is true?" And he goes, and he was like, "No, it's not true. I lied. I lied." Yeah, but what if you're lying now about lying? And so his plan backfired on him. You think you're just gonna roll out of here because you're tired of things? No, you need to go through what any other sexual abuse victim goes through, so you can see how serious this is and what a person who is sexually abused has to go through after they have been violated. It is embarrassing. It is horrible. It is literally you've already been violated by one person, so now you've got to go to the hospital, and you've got to meet with person after person after person. You have to keep telling your story over and over and over, and all you want to know is, did I contract a disease? Did I get pregnant? Did I, the basics? Because when I worked with women, with the same nurse at this women's shelter I worked at years ago, we got a lot of calls from the hospital saying people, they would bring somebody in that was sexually assaulted, and we would go and sit with them while they went through this whole process of cataloging their clothing, going through the DNA swabs, repeating their story over and over again. I mean, you are under a microscope. It is such a long process that that guy in particular didn't realize. He thought he was going to say this. Everybody was going to be like, "Oh, poor guy," and then I guess everybody was going to come around him and bring presents. I don't know. Well, it did not happen. Let me tell you, it did not happen. And of course, I still made my report, still did what I needed to do, whether he lied or not. This is what he told me. And my report is not opinion. My report is fact. That's the most important thing, is that when you're writing this stuff down, you don't want to put your opinion. You want to put the facts, and you want to put why you are thinking what you're thinking. Okay, such and such I think is such and such was abused. Why? What is giving that? Oh, I saw bruises. I saw this. I saw that. That's it. State the facts, get in, get out. So anyway, thanks for your time. And if you have any questions, concerns about this topic, about this information that we've covered, please feel free to email me. My email is posted on this page. If you need a certificate of completion in regards to this topic for school or for work, no problem. Email me as well on that, or comment below. And feel free to comment, and tell me some things that you might have gone through, or some stories that you would like to share, or concerns that you may have. How are things in your state? How are things in your city? What has this ever happened to you? Have you ever seen a coworker or a family member or someone do this to a person, so how are you relating to this content? Please share. That gets conversation going. It creates awareness. The more we're talking about it, the more we're aware of it. I'm hoping the less it happens. Because remember, that's that key. Abuse can be very isolating. So we need to, get in there as caretakers and really bring some things to light and show people that they are not alone. I have an ear. I have two. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on. I'm here to listen. I'm not here to judge. So also subscribe to the channel so you can get notified when new videos come out. And if you are a content creator and would like to collaborate on an educational video, or you would like to share some information, or maybe a topic that you've already done yourself that you would like to share on my page, that would be awesome. The whole point of this page is to help educate people, raise awareness, provide really solid training for people, as opposed to what they're probably getting now, which is the, hello, how you doing? Give me your ID, give me your social security card, wow. We need to be educating. And if you don't know something, it's okay to ask questions. So if you don't know anything or something sounds weird to you of what I said, please definitely contact me, reach out, just, be nice. Don't rip me apart and be like, God, you're so stupid. Remember, we just talked about abuse. I don't need to be abused by my followers. So I appreciate you guys very much for taking the time on this, and I'm really hoping that we can make some differences and some changes together and really raise the standard of our profession. It is definitely, it is very rewarding. It's very challenging, but it's very rewarding to sit there and watch the progress that you make with somebody, to make that connection with someone that may not be able to connect normally with others, to have someone trust you so much that they their life is pretty much in your hands, so just remember that. So as always, I tell everybody, be safe, wear a mask, and I will see you guys at the next video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.